Ladies and gentlemen, this is DVP World. You're watching another edition of Break the Fake, where we debunk fake news and combat false narratives. I'm your host, Benjamin Lee, and let's get rolling. Now, as we all know, Russia's specialty is spreading disinformation. On today's episode of Break the Fake, we dissect a number of the Kremlin's fine pieces of fake news, starting with a twisted version of history written by the Russian embassy in Warsaw. Now, this time, the embassy is challenging facts about the first weeks of the Second World War. 2 days ago, on September 17th, Poland commemorated the anniversary of the Soviet invasion, which took place more than 2 weeks after the Germans started World War II by attacking Poland, once again breaking the international order. The Russian invasion of Poland, which was fighting for its existence, came as a result of the secret clause in the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact signed on August 23, 1939. Germany and the Soviet Union divided Central Eastern Europe, resulting in what historians call the Fourth Partition of Poland. The Russian embassy in Warsaw, however, decided to present a different version of the story, calling the Soviet invasion of 1939 a military operation. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? But that's just the beginning. It only gets better. The Kremlin's representatives to Poland are creating an alternative version of history by saying that the actions of the Soviet forces temporarily saved the population of former eastern Polish regions from genocide. They, however, forgot to mention that the genocides they committed on Polish army officers and intelligentsia. After the Russians occupied the territory of the Republic of Poland, they began the mass deportation of Poles to Siberia. Around 1,400,000 Polish citizens were deported deep into the Soviet Union. Many died en route, and thousands never returned. Among the deportees were families of military officers, civil servants, as well as forestry and railway workers from the eastern areas of pre-war Poland. And that's not all of the population saving done by the Soviet state during the Second World War. In the spring of 1940, the Soviets murdered nearly 22,000 citizens of the Polish state. The victims of the crime included approximately 14.5 thousand prisoners of war and 7.3 thousand civilians. They were murdered with a shot to the head from the back and buried in mass graves. What is now known as the Katyn massacre was directed not only against people, but also against the truth. Until 1990, the authorities of the USSR denied their responsibility for the murder of Polish citizens and falsely blamed it on the Germans. That only shows that Russia's biggest eternal enemy is the truth. The last claim made by the Russian embassy is about the reaction of Western allies of Poland to the Soviet invasion. They claim that France and Britain didn't call it an act of aggression at the time. Well, it is the same case that the Western reaction to the Soviet attack on Poland was surprisingly restrained and almost silent. Although France and Britain were formerly allies of Poland, they did not take decisive steps against or issue strong protests to the Soviet Union. The reason behind the reaction of Western allies was fear of a simultaneous confrontation with Germany and the USSR, which would have meant a war on two fronts. Now, this situation was a great disappointment to the Polish government, which expected their allies to condemn the Soviets as strongly as they did Germany. Well, that wasn't the first time the West was wrong about Russia. To learn a bit of truth about this subject, let's listen to our expert.
Soviet Union became ally of the Western powers just in 1941. In 1939, they were allies of Germany. Therefore, it is quite important to understand the Second World War, but also the Cold War afterwards, that during the Second World War, there were at least three sides with different goals to achieve. There were Nazi Germany, there were Soviet Union, and the Western powers. And first 2 years, two totalitarian regimes, Germany and Soviet Union, were allies. And after German attack on the Soviet Union, the system of alliances changed. But the Western powers paid very big price for that, because they became allies of the Soviet Union, but after the war, they had to pay the price of the whole Central Europe that came into Soviet sphere of influence. Not only those territories straight incorporated into Soviet Union, but also formerly independent states like Poland, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, Romania, etc., etc. So this is this beginning of Second World War is also explanation for what happened afterwards.
Everyone in the West asks themselves why Putin started the war with Ukraine. A country that can barely support their own citizens decided to invade a neighbor. Since the beginning of Russia's full-scale invasion, support for Ukraine has been unwavering in Western society. There will never be consent to use violence against the innocent. Most Russians, however, deny their responsibility blindly, following the Kremlin narrative. Staying on Russian delusions, let's have a look at the finest of the Kremlin's propagandists that don't always follow a script. Since the beginning of the war, Russian media has been tasked with instilling in the minds of Russians Putin's vision of events that led to the outbreak of hostilities. Most of the propagandists obediently follow the scripts written by the Kremlin, but some, perhaps by mistake, occasionally speak a few words of truth. Now, this time questioning why in the first place Russia started this war. No wonder the anchor had to interrupt the program. A few phone calls probably had to be made, and I wonder if Alexander Katyn was still a guest after the break.
По поводу общественного мнения Европы и Америки. Но если вы в течение без малого 100 лет вбиваете в голову людям, что главное – это эмпатия, то в какой-то момент, и все эти люди, так или иначе, еще читают соответствующие сайты и ходят к психологу, то в какой-то момент это выстрелит. И безумные страдания украинского народа отзовутся в американской душе бесконечным сочувствием и желанием помочь.
Не надо корчить рожи, Максим Анатольевич. Это то же самое, что вы говорили, только вы назвали это свихнул.
Какие-то слова вот странные стали.
Почему?
Вам не свойственные. Во-первых, не рожа, а лицо.
Нет, это абсолютнейшая реальность. Теперь, что касается Украины. Украина одушевлена одной идеей. Не дать россиянам жить комфортно. Прекратить их комфортное существование. С этой точки зрения гадать, по каким объектам будет нанесен удар, совершенно бессмысленно. Им главное вообще нанести. Ну, а теперь ставится вопрос, каким образом Россия может и будет отвечать на это. В данном случае у меня тоже два вопроса предварительные в этой связи. Я, конечно, понимаю, что для 80% населения России Лондон и Париж, которые прозвучали в качестве возможных целей в случае эскалации конфликта, это то же самое, что для меня Хартум, скажем. Но...
Надо было обязательно из Африки город выбирать. Как смотрите, да-да-да.
Я могу Багдад назвать, какая разница.
Так.
Значит, ситуация следующая. Значит, можно, конечно, как сказал один наполеоновский маршал, если надо будет сжечь Париж, мы сожжем Париж. Но это ничего не даст. Кроме очередного витка сильной эскалации. И второе. Путин вчера недвусмысленно сказал о том, что он отчетливо понимает, что это поведет к конфликту, победителей в котором не будет. В связи с этим у меня абсолютно риторический вопрос. А ради чего вообще все это затеяно? Ради того, извините, чтобы сдохнуть, будучи обладателями Крыма и Донбасса?
Зачем? Мы сдыхать не собираемся, но мы собирались себя защитить. Это еще было ясно несколько лет назад. Просто ребята не захотели нас
тогда еще одно замечание. Дело в том, что в элитах западных существует отчетливое мнение о том, что надо лишить Россию некомфортной колбасы, а лишить ее возможности осуществлять агрессию, ибо именно так понимаются действия в отношении Украины. Но в общественном мнении, то, с чего я начал, все сочувствуют Охламке.
Особенно после
давайте мы сделаем тогда паузу.
Прерваться надо, да? Прервемся.
Да.
It seems that Russian propaganda will continue to provide us with content which, in its absurdity, is at times amusing. And that's all for now on this episode of Break the Fake. But for more news, update, and commentary, please stay tuned to TVP World.